Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on the program. This time, we're looking at election. Those of you, it's either you're proud or you're not about the Nigerian electoral process. But whichever way you feel tonight, we need to also learn there are a lot of history that we share with Ghana. Tonight, we can report to you that the former president, John Dramani Mahama, has gotten a historic comeback, and after winning the election with some of the results coming in earlier today, voters appear to have pushed out the ruling New Patriotic Party over the management of economic crisis. The NPP candidate and the Vice President Muhammadu Bawumia earlier today considered defeat in the presidential election conducted from yesterday, after failing to shake off the widespread frustration over high cost of living. The defeat in the election ended 8 years in power of the NPP under President Nana Akufo-Addo, marked by the West African state's worst economic turmoil in years of high inflation and a debt default. Let me allow you to listen to what the Vice President and the candidate of the NPP said when considering the defeat. This is Muhammadu Bawumia.
We have conceded defeat like any consummate Democrat would do. But we have not abandoned the fight to transform Ghana and expand opportunities to all sections of our society. We will not be a disruptive opposition.
That is the candidate of the NPP there, considering the defeat. This looks like something that is very much familiar. We saw this happening at the general elections of 2015 when the then president, Goodluck Jonathan, considered defeat. We also heard of Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti in the governorship election considering defeat. So it looks like a culture also familiar to the Nigerian elections, but not something that may be rampant, because a lot of politicians in Africa and in this part of the world always want to push their defeat and test their defeat in court. But let's get some perspective for someone who has been underground, who monitored the election. I'm being joined by the Executive Director of Yaga Africa, Mr. Samson Itodo, who is live for us in Accra. Thank you so much, Samson, for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone.
How do you describe the outcome of that election? Is it something familiar? Is it something you would say? That's why a lot of Nigerians said the South African election gave them some reasons to look deeper into our elections. Does the Ghana election look even better than the South African experience?
Absolutely. The Ghanaian election does look better for a plethora of reasons. First, Ghanaians have spoken in accent clear and skill still. They've chosen a new actor or new leadership because of several reasons that are connected to the economy, are connected to security, and also connected, to state capture and corruption. And they've spoken loud and clear, and we hope that their voices and their will be respected. You reference, the concession speech. That speech that was delivered this morning at 9:35 a.m., reinforces Ghana's position as a poster child of democracy. In the build-up to this election, Ghana was undergoing a test, and it's a litmus test for its democratic maturity. And that action, putting your nation first, putting your country first above your personal aspiration, is the greatest act, and Dr. Bawumia has written his name in gold. But he chose that course of action because, one, yesterday, after the voting and collation, there was huge tension. In fact, as we speak, as at this evening and this afternoon, there were cases of, violence where young people, are vandalizing buildings of the Electoral Commission in some constituencies due to the delays in the collation of the result. He could only concede defeat because the process was transparent and it was credible. And this is what we're urging other countries, to employ. Now, when a process is free, is fair, is credible, acceptability of electoral outcomes is guaranteed. But when you have flawed elections, where you have elections that are stolen, or rules are not respected, or electoral commissions are not transparent and do not inspire public confidence, what you get is the kind of litigation that you see not just in Nigeria but in other parts of Africa. So we're very, very happy with Ghana, and Ghana is rising, as a model for other countries to emulate, especially countries, who care about democracy.
I mean, there are a few things that we also need to understand about this election. And of course, the Ghanaian electoral process did stipulate that before a winner could emerge, who would have needed to cross the 51% of the vote margin, which Bawumia perhaps have seen that this is unassailable, and John Dramani Mahama had crossed that. And like you mentioned, there are issues of violence across. The Nigerian experience is totally different from the, there are categories to determine the winner in Nigeria. You definitely have to have a majority of votes, and of course you have to have 25% in 2/3 of the nation. So now these are different experiences, but you look at how, and there are those who are saying in several parts of Ghana, the collation is still ongoing. Now, if you look at the manner in the conduct of that election, Ghana is a smaller country to Nigeria in terms of size and in terms of population. So the comparison needs to also be circumspect. Now, if you look at it, what would you say that we can extrapolate from the Ghanaian electoral experience compared to ours?
There are so many things we can learn from the Ghanaian experience, but let me just highlight three that are critical, for our own electoral jurisprudence. The first one is the level of transparency in the results collation process. So at the national level, the results from the constituencies for the presidential election, are collated at the constituency level. So they go from the polling unit to the constituency level to the regional level. And then the results are faxed. They use fax machines to transmit the result from the regional level to the national headquarters. But here is what happens at the national headquarters. When the results are faxed and they get to the national headquarters, the Electoral Commission takes a copy of the results, photocopies the results, and give them to all the party agents. All the party agents are given 20 minutes to review and verify the results. In other words, since you've got party agents across, it is expected that when you're in the collation center, you should have results from those constituencies. So party agents have the opportunity to compare the results from the region as well as the results that they got from their party agents on the field. When that verification process is concluded, it then goes to the chair of the commission, who is the chief electoral commissioner. And then she endorses it. They bring it back and then photocopy all the results and hand them over to the parties. That is a level of transparency that we also need to imbibe, especially when we collate results, whether for governorship elections or for presidential elections. The second thing to learn, and we find this really phenomenal, is that every political party has got its own seal that it puts on the ballot boxes. So on election day, INEC has seals that it puts to lock the ballot boxes. The political parties are also required to produce their seals, and those seals have number. They also lock the ballot boxes to prevent any form of manipulation. Because if those seals are broken, it then means that the ballots have been compromised. This is also one lesson. The third lesson from this particular election is the special voting opportunity that is provided for the electoral officials, the security agents, and then media organizations. They vote few days before the elections. So on the 2nd, this category of persons voted before the election on the 7th. And now that the National Assembly is considering early voting to allow both INEC officials, security agencies, election observers, and media organizations like yourself, Sheryl, it requires a lot of support to ensure that those provisions make it to the final electoral bill that is passed. Because if you don't, we are disenfranchising close to 4 million Nigerians who are unable to vote on election by virtue of providing election day services. I can go on and on, but one thing that is actually remarkable is the role that institutions actually play, the value of strong institutions. Because all of the things we talk about, whether it's the concession speech, the level of transparency, the level of political literacy of Ghanaians, is contingent on a culture that is dominant in this space. You don't buy culture from the market. You have to build culture. This is why Nigerian politicians, Nigerian political parties need to imbibe certain democratic practices, that doesn't project them as only interested in capturing power just to advance inter-elite interest, but the one that advances the common good.
Now, I saw the INEC chairman is also on an observation mission in Ghana for that election. And I'm wondering what will be going on through his mind right now in what needs to be changed ahead of the next elections in Nigeria. Some of what you have mentioned in comparative analysis are institutional changes that goes right into the heart of our laws, the Electoral Act and the Constitution. I know there are efforts in making changes and review to the Electoral Act. If there are major changes that should be changed, considering the experience that we've had in South Africa and in Africa, in Ghana, for example, for us to call ourselves the giant of Africa and our elections are still tainted with some elements of doubt, trust issues, and some operational problems. What do you think, or what would you suggest are the critical areas that need to be touched up urgently on our laws?
Cheryl, I think the first thing we need to talk about is the attitude of our political class. And I don't think legislation can actually lead to attitudinal changes. It might at some point, but our politicians need to change their attitude towards politics. That politics is not a do or die affair. That if you lose elections, and you're rejected by the people, honorably, just leave the scene because you can't force yourself, on the people. That's one. And then when you think about the laws, there are several laws that need to change. Our constitution, needs to introduce independent candidacy because Ghanaians have independent candidates. The second is the institution itself needs to be independent. And in this case, INEC needs to be independent. The appointment process of the INEC chairman and national commissioners needs to be revised in line with the recommendation by Justice Uwe's, committee, as well as several domestic and international observer recommendations. The third sort of reform, I've talked about early voting in our electoral law, is prisoners voting, because the right to vote is a sacred right in a democracy. And our laws need to be amended in such a way that they do nothing but expand the space for voters and Nigerians to be able to exercise their franchise. I think lastly, one law, and changes that need to be made, relates to the cost, of running for office as well as the cost of elections. We have to reduce the cost of running for office and the charges that are being imposed on people who are running for office. Because if we don't do so, we will end up with people who win elections and their first preoccupation, is to recoup the monies that they spend, in their elections. And I just hope that as the National Assembly proceeds, with the reforms, the proposal that all election petitions should end before swearing in, is a remarkable proposal that needs to be adopted so that it streamlines and reduces all the confusion that we have in our electoral system.
Samson Itodo, thank you so much. We need to learn. The day we stop learning, they say, is the day we die. So it could be better here. Thank you so much indeed. Samson Itodo, Executive Director of Yaga Africa, who led some Nigerians on an election observation mission to Ghana for the election here. Congratulations to John Dramani Mahama, who is now going to be the winner and the new leader of Ghana. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.